Hi, everyone, and welcome to another product leadership session with Jonas and I. We've talked about stakeholders the first time and how difficult it is. And this time we want to tackle another one of those big problems, which is 3 questions you need to be able to answer as a CEO and CPO team. And so we thought the 3 main questions that occur to us are: what problems does your product actually solve and for who? Then, obviously, second part that follows is how are you selling it? How you're packaging it, etc. And then third, actually, to get there, what's your most important metric? How do you iterate and improve in order to achieve your goals? And without further ado, let's start with the first piece, which is what problems does your product solve and for whom? And I think Jonas has a view on this.
Yeah, exactly. I'll start off with a quote from a wise man, Christian, and say Einstein back in the day said, "If I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend the 55 minutes understanding the problem in detail, and then the remaining 5 minutes coming up with the solution." The
Yeah.
point he wanted to bring across was that a firm understanding and clarification around the problems you're solving for, that process kind of leads you towards the optimal solution. And it is in human nature for us to focus on ideas and solutions. It's much more fun to come up with solutions rather than understanding problems. And as such, we tend to gravitate towards that, focusing on ideas, but we lose sight of what's the original problem we're trying to solve here, right? So as a product leader, your main task is to, well, let's call you the guardian of problem statements, right? Is to ensure that your team and the rest of the organization you're part of is focused on what's the problem with the customer, the user, the market that we are intending to solve. It's important to remember that then as you deal with understanding problems and you communicate them, is that you don't become too abstract in the way you state the problems. They have to be concrete, ideally from the point of view of your target user. So, similar format as you would write a user story statement. That kind of makes it concrete, it forces you, and it makes it memorable for the receiver. Also, when you work with a set of problems or you break down a problem to understand it in more detail, don't become too detailed in the way you break it out. Keep it at a certain level, right? You very easily lose sight of what you're trying to solve if you go into an end level of detail trying to understand it. So keep it focused and at the right abstraction level as you dig into it. And then internally and externally, and as a product leader, you have to repeat the problems. You kind of, in every room and every setting you move into, keep in mind that you are the guardian of the problems, as in you keep repeating and bring people their focus back onto the original problem we're here to solve, bridge that across to the solutions being discussed as a way of validating those.
If I can just interrupt briefly. So what you're saying is, well, I agree with the focus part. I found that focus is really important. You need to cut down on what you're trying to achieve in order to actually achieve these things. And repeating them is super important. I completely agree with you. But yeah, focus seems the one that helped me the most in the past. Basically, is focus on very few items, and then you can achieve them.
And then make them concrete.
Yeah.
And it sounds simple, but it's actually quite hard.
Yeah, agreed. Completely agreed. And I'm going to move on quickly now to how are we selling it and how is it packaged? And the reason this is a biggie that we think everybody should know, including us, because we make the mistake all the time, but it's a biggie that's really important to consider for teams, is this will decide whether you're successful or not. Even if you have a good product, you might not be as successful as you could because you misstructure, so to speak, your product in the market. And the biggest question there is to figure out, what do people pay for? What's the value they get? Is it a one-off? Is it repeat? So do you want a one-off payment? Do you want subscriptions? How do you create this relationship between the value people are getting from you and that they perceive they're getting from you, and the price they're going to pay and what they're going to, what format. And so I've worked on many different ones. I think it deserves a lot of attention. And I'll give you a couple of examples. The subscription, I've seen a subscription once, a product that was built as a subscription service, but actually the value was very much one-offs. So you would get something once a year, let's say like a tax software, but they structured the subscription so that you would be locked in, of course. But then nobody, it really, we did user request, user testing, and it really slowed people down in their sign up because they thought, well, I know how this is going to go. I'm going to give my credit card number. I'm going to forget to cancel next year, and I'm going to be charged twice at least. And so people are a bit wary about these things already. So the best way for me to approach this was literally to map out the values people are getting, map out what they think they're getting, and try and figure out the best business model that adapts to that, basically. And so once you figured out your business model and how you're charging people, then you can map this onto the sales funnel, onto advertisements, onto partnerships, onto everything else. And this will impact basically everything you're doing as a communication to the user. And, it's one of those that seems at first a little bit as if it was something that you can maybe, try here, there, and see what happens, but it deserves a lot of attention, basically. It's the same as you said before with the iterations. It's, you think that you've told the team once where you want to go and that's that, but it's absolutely not. You need to repeat it all the time. And this takes a lot of effort, a lot of monitoring, a lot of user research as well. Yep.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Christian, because I think it's often product people tend to, and I've done it myself as well, think that this is disconnected of the actual core product development, right? And that it kind of follows a sequence. First, you build a product, and then you think about go to market. But actually, they're intertwined. The way you build the product is also determined on how you intend to bring it to market.
Exactly. The way you build the delivery of the value to the user informs how the user perceives it and informs how the user is comfortable paying for it and how to maximize the uptake, basically. Completely agreed. Yeah.
And speaking of the user,
yeah,
another thing that's important, right, is metrics.
Exactly. That's our third thing. The consensus that we've reached is that you need fewer metrics, but you need very clear metrics that are going to inform how your team is going to chase them, basically.
Absolutely. I'll actually endeavor to try to cover off all the 3 points we talked about around problem, how to bring to market, and or how to position the product, and then finally how you measure the performance of a product. Basically, I was at a travel tour operator early on in my career, and there was back in the day where mobile devices were coming up, and there was a push around any websites. They were pushing for customer conversion parity between desktop traffic and mobile traffic, right? Yeah. There was a push towards that for years, and that was so customer conversion was the North Star metric. At this company, we had a increasing share of mobile traffic coming through, but we didn't see the customer conversion parity kick in. We looked into it, whether we were focusing on the right problem. Yeah. And what we found out was that the mobile traffic was coming through in the commuting hours, people going to work, coming back from work. That's when people started using their mobile phones. No surprise there. Through interviews, we found out that there was no chance that our users or customers would buy a tour holiday on a mobile device while on the tube in London, as an example. The price point was simply too high for a tour, and the decision was too important. It was the family holiday during the summer period. So we changed the problem statements towards how can we create an experience that enables users or the customer to browse our product catalog while on the move, on the tube in London, as an extreme example, poor coverage, etc. And how how can we make that a rich experience and drive customer happiness? So that was a case where we changed the problem statement through research, and then through there we changed the underlying metrics to measure that experience, and that turned out. So we changed it from there's no chance we'll reach customer conversion parity with desktop, but instead we should look to make that a browsing experience instead.
The typical example I have is people say a very common theme is we need a better UI. And so everybody goes on about we need a better UI. And I'm asking why? Because there's a lot of crappy apps that you use because you have to. And so you use them, even if it's a bad UI. So will the UI make a difference? And so it's interesting because if you go into a measurable metric and you say, yes, I'm doing the UI, I'm going to improve it because I want to sign up more people, then you should see a difference, right? And basically, my whole thing is then to say, okay, if we want to improve the sign-up rate, this is what we're going to put on the dashboard very clearly. And this is a big number on the dashboard so that the whole team sees it. And then everything we do will be to change that. So if we change the UI and we see that there's no differences, there's no point of going on about the UI. We can switch to try something else. And I think, and so I think as a product lead, just to wrap up this metrics point, which we think is super important, because it will drive what your team does. And therefore, I think, on the portfolio level, you will need all your teams to have their own metrics, but they need to be super clear. They need to be reviewed all the time. Same as the iterations for the focus. The metrics is what the team is going to chase to show whether you're making progress towards your goal. And so I think as a portfolio, as a leader, you need basically your team to have super clear metrics reviewed all the time and change them if they're not the right ones anymore, right?
That's right, and also a way of managing you're leading your team and driving your portfolio in the appropriate direction, right? Because applying targets to North Star metrics and underlying metrics, of course, also gives the team the empowerment, but you give the direction of where you want the team to bring the product, right?
Absolutely. I think that's it. Those were our three biggest questions. Thanks for listening. If you're still listening, thank you.
And keep the feedback coming.
Yeah, please, everyone, send us feedback.